The tank that changed Korea did not arrive like a miracle. It arrived like a mistake. 3 M26 Pershings were found in a depot in Japan with dead engines, missing parts and belts so unreliable that nobody could promise they would survive Korean summer heat. And at that exact moment, Soviet-built T-34s were already rolling down South Korean roads like nothing in the American inventory could touch them. Not the old bazookas, not the light tanks, not the men who had been rushed out of occupation duty and told to hold a country together with weapons that belonged to the last war. The strange part is this. America already had a tank that could kill the T-34. It was not secret. It was not experimental. It was not waiting on some future design. It was sitting in storage. And for the first month of the war, the difference between collapse and survival was not courage. It was cooling fans, fan belts, rail schedules, and whether anyone in the system could move the right machine before the map ran out of space. June 25, 1950. North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel with a spearhead built around T-34-85 medium tanks. To the soldiers watching them come south, those tanks carried more than steel. They carried reputation. The T-34 had helped break the Wehrmacht in the east. Its armor was sloped, its gun was dangerous, and its diesel engine gave it a toughness that made it feel almost unnatural to men who had never faced one. South Korea had almost no armor to answer it. The first American unit sent into the fight had M24 Chaffee light tanks, older 2.36-inch bazookas, recoilless rifles, and artillery pieces that had not been sent to Korea to stop a tank offensive. On paper, that was a bad match. On the road, it was worse. At Pusan, Task Force Smith learned the difference between a weapon that looks useful on a table and a weapon that works when a tank is still coming after the smoke clears. The Americans fired. The T-34s kept moving. Bazooka teams crawled close enough to see the plates and seams on the enemy armor. Rounds struck, flashed, and failed. Howitzer crews used what they had until the special anti-tank shells were gone. Then high-explosive shells burst against steel and did little except prove how desperate the situation had become. For the men on those ridges, the lesson was not technical. It was physical. You could do everything you were trained to do and still watch the machine keep coming. That is how a tank becomes a rumor. Not because it cannot be killed. Because the first people who try to kill it fail so completely that the failure travels faster than the facts. Within days, the T-34 was no longer just a North Korean tank. It was the sound of tracks on a road at night. It was the shape appearing through dust. It was the sentence whispered down a line before the men saying it even knew where the vehicle was. They cannot stop it. And the worst thing about that sentence was that, for a while, it was close enough to true. The American army in Japan had been hollowed out by peace. After World War II, the United States had demobilized fast. Tanks were expensive to maintain. Heavy equipment looked less urgent in a world that wanted to believe the next war would not look like the last one. So when Korea exploded, the Far East Command had men, rifles, and flags on maps. What it did not have was enough medium armor ready to fight. Then in a depot in Japan, someone found 3 M26 Pershings. They were not sitting there like heroes waiting for a bugle call. They were sitting there like machines that had been forgotten by a system that no longer expected to need them. The Pershing had been designed at the end of World War II to deal with the kind of problem American tankers had met in Europe. Heavy enemy armor, long gun lines, frontal fights where a lighter tank could not simply hope to be faster and luckier. It carried a 90mm gun. Against a T-34 that mattered. The T-34 could beat the light tanks America first had in Korea. But the Pershing changed the arithmetic. Its gun could punch through the armor that had been terrifying infantrymen and Chaffee crews up and down the peninsula. The problem was never whether the Pershing could kill a T-34. The problem was whether the Pershing could be made to run. Mechanics worked on dead engines and neglected components. Cooling systems were inspected. Belts were replaced or improvised. Every repair carried the same unspoken question. Will it hold long enough? Not on a test ground, not in a parade. On Korean roads in heat under load with men inside who had no margin left. The 3 Pershings were shipped into Korea and placed under Lieutenant Samuel Fowler. That sounds clean in a history book. It was not clean. It was an emergency platoon built out of whatever the army could make move. The crews had limited time. The spare parts chain was catching up after the decision had already been made. The tanks themselves were powerful, but tired in exactly the wrong places. Then the Korean summer did what enemy fire had not yet done. It stopped them. Near Chinju, the first 3 Pershings overheated and failed. Belts and cooling problems turned the most promising anti-tank answer in Korea into dead weight on the road. Fowler was wounded in the fighting. The tanks were abandoned and destroyed before they could become the weapon everyone needed them to be. That failure is the part of the story that matters, because it proves the Pershing did not save anything just by existing. A good gun in a broken hull is not a solution. A correct answer trapped in a bad supply chain is still a wrong answer on the day men need it. For the soldiers falling back toward the Pusan perimeter, the first Pershing attempt did not break the myth of the T-34. It strengthened it. The tank that was supposed to stop the monster had not even reached the monster, so the lines kept shrinking. Seoul had already fallen. Roads, towns, bridges, and river lines disappeared into the retreat. The Pusan perimeter became the last defended pocket of South Korea, pressed against the sea in the southeastern corner of the peninsula. Inside it were American, South Korean, and other UN troops trying to hold. Outside it were North Korean divisions that still believed momentum belonged to them. And every time a T-34 appeared, it carried the memory of Osan with it. Not every soldier understood armor penetration tables. Every soldier understood this. If the tanks broke through here, there might not be another line behind them. But more American armor was arriving, not smoothly, not in the kind of numbers commanders wanted, not always with crews who had trained long enough to feel comfortable inside the vehicles, but it was arriving. M4 Shermans, M26 Pershings, M46 Pattons. The war was no longer a fight between T-34s and men with weapons too light for the job. The balance was beginning to change. What had not changed yet was belief. That is the invisible problem in every emergency. The solution can arrive before the institution fully trusts it. A commander can read a technical sheet and still remember the broken vehicles outside Chinju. A tanker can sit behind a better gun and still hear all the stories about bazooka rounds skipping away at 15 yards. A weapon does not become real in a war because someone says it should work. It becomes real when it works in front of the people who need to believe it. That moment came on August 17, 1950, near Obong-ri. A Marine Pershing faced North Korean T-34s. No warehouse, no demonstration range, no time for theory. Just a road, a line of fire, and the question that had been chasing the Americans since the first week of July. Would the T-34 keep coming? The Pershing fired. The first T-34 was hit and stopped, then another, then another. In a few minutes the rumor cracked. Not everywhere, not all at once, but enough. The same kind of vehicle that had rolled through weak roadblocks and terrified under-equipped units was now burning because a 90mm gun had done exactly what the tables said it would do. The psychological effect was larger than the wrecks, because the battlefield had been waiting for proof. One destroyed tank can be called luck, 2 can be explained away, 3 starts to look like a pattern, and once the pattern was visible, the T-34 changed shape in the American mind. It was still dangerous, it was still lethal. It could still kill men who made mistakes or met it under the wrong conditions, but it was no longer supernatural. It had become a target. That sounds simple now. It was not simple then. The Pershing had its own weaknesses. It was heavy. Its engine was underpowered for the country it had been thrown into. Korea punished vehicles. Hills, narrow roads, mud, heat, and bad maintenance could defeat a tank long before enemy fire reached it. Crews had to learn not only how to shoot the T-34, but how to keep the Pershing alive long enough to get the shot. That meant maintenance discipline. Spare parts, cooling systems, fuel, recovery vehicles, ammunition. Crew training compressed into days instead of months. It meant turning a machine into a method. The men who understood that were not all famous combat commanders. Some were mechanics, some were ordnance officers. Some were tank officers who knew that a gun advantage meant nothing if tanks were scattered one at a time into infantry positions where they could be isolated, overheated, or misused. The answer was not just to have Pershings. It was to put them where their gun mattered, keep them running, and force the T-34 to fight at ranges where the American tank held the advantage. That is where the war changed from fear to procedure. A road was not just a road anymore. It was a range lane. A bend was not just a bend. It was a place to decide when the lead tank would appear, how much of its hull would be exposed, and how many seconds a gunner would have before the enemy column reacted. A hill was not just high ground. It was protection or a trap or a place where a Pershing might lose mobility if the driver chose badly. The men who had once been told simply to stop the tanks were now learning a more precise language. Hold the range, break the lead vehicle, compress the column. Kill the next tank before the road clears. Do not let the T-34 get close enough for numbers to erase the gun advantage. This was not glamour. It was arithmetic under stress, and war often turns on exactly that. Not the machine alone. The machine used at the correct distance, in the correct terrain, by men who understand what part of the machine actually wins the fight. By late summer, North Korean armor was no longer enjoying the same freedom it had in June and July. Heavier UN tanks were appearing. Air attack and supply problems were taking their toll. The roads that had carried the offensive south were becoming more dangerous in reverse. The T-34 crews were still brave. The tank was still formidable. But the campaign around them was starting to change. The same spearhead that had opened the war was being cut, burned, abandoned, and worn down. Then came September 15th. Incheon, the landing far behind North Korean lines, did what no tank fight could do by itself. It cut supply routes, shattered the shape of the campaign, and turned the pressure around. But Incheon needed the perimeter to still exist. That is the part easy retellings miss. A landing behind enemy lines is only decisive if the army in front has not already collapsed. The Pusan perimeter had to hold long enough for the larger move to matter, and the arrival of heavier armor helped make that possible. The Pershing did not win Korea by itself. No honest version of this story says that. Aircraft, artillery, infantry, logistics, naval power, South Korean resistance, and the Incheon landing all mattered. But the Pershing answered one problem that had been poisoning the first weeks of the war. It showed that the T-34 could be killed in direct armored combat. That changed what soldiers expected from the next sound of tracks on a road. Fear did not vanish. It became organized. That is the difference between panic and doctrine. By the end of 1950, hundreds of M26 Pershings had reached Korea. The tank would not remain the favorite for long. Its mobility problems were real, and the improved M46 Patton would take over much of the role. But the essential lessons survived the vehicle. Bring the right gun. Keep the vehicle running. Do not mistake a technical solution for an operational solution. And never let a correct answer rot in storage while men at the front are paying for its absence. There is a brutal irony at the center of the Pershing story. The United States did not lack bravery in Korea. It did not lack men willing to crawl toward tanks with weapons they knew might fail. It did not lack officers writing reports that made the problem clear. What it lacked, in the opening weeks, was the readiness to match the war that actually arrived. That gap had a price. It was paid at Osan. It was paid on roads south of Seoul. It was paid by crews in light tanks asked to fight a vehicle built for a different weight class. It was paid by Fowler's men when the first Pershings reached Korea only to die from heat and maintenance before they could deliver the answer they carried. And then, piece by piece, the gap closed. Not cleanly, not heroically in the way movies prefer. With depot labor, emergency shipping, broken belts, overheated engines, range estimates, gunner training, and tankers learning to trust steel that had almost arrived too late. The T-34 entered Korea as a certainty. The Pershing did not destroy that certainty with legend. It destroyed it with proof. A round through armor, a road held long enough, a myth reduced back into machinery. That is why the forgotten tank matters. Not because it was perfect. Because it shows the distance between having the answer and using it in time. In Korea, that distance was measured in supply manifests, fan belts, burning roads, and the seconds between a gunner seeing the lead tank and deciding to fire. And for a country trapped inside the Pusan perimeter, those seconds were enough to matter.